He said that his goal is to bounce the last check he ever writes before he dies. He's like, I would like to bounce that last check and just die with nothing, just go out
Mm-hmm.
and having experienced and done all these things, hunts and adventures
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. And that's kind of how I see, that's kind of my perception on things. Um,
That's amazing, man.
yeah. Yeah. He tells another cool story. He says that he went on a muskox hunt and he got up there and found out that he could buy 2 tags, and he had to borrow the money to get the second tag. And then he, harvested 2 muskox with his bow, flew home, realized he didn't have enough gas in his pickup truck to actually get from the airport to home. So had to borrow more money to make it home. But like, I really relate with that. That's kind of, my outlook when it comes to financials and money.
I love that, dude. In my podcast with my dad, something I never knew about my dad. So there was a time in our childhood that he lost everything. As an entrepreneur, he lost a lot of money and had to sell everything, all the assets he had. I mean, ended up buying a $50 van to drive around in. But his annual elk hunt was coming up. And, even though he was going through all this financial turmoil, he told his business partners, hey, just so you know, I'm leaving for 14 days, next week.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, even if I have to borrow the money, I'm going. And someone heard him say that or something. And they actually called him back. They're like, hey, if you need the money, man, I'll lend you the money. He didn't have to borrow the money, but I can promise you he would have borrowed the money to go. And he went, this is before cell phones or anything. He went over there for 14 days or 16 days or whatever. And actually it was part of what ended this partnership he was in, because it drove his partners crazy that he could leave in such a tumultuous time. But he's like, you know what? Fuck it. Nothing's going to change. I'm going on this elk hunt. And he said, I went and I had an amazing time. I tried not even to think about it. I knew it'd be there when I got back, but that's how my dad is. I struggle with that, dude, because, for other reasons. But to your point, I think that's the right way to go, man. Like, you have to have money to a certain threshold to allow the experiences, right? Or like, if you have kids and a family, like there's certain obligations you have to cover, right? If you have a mortgage or whatever. But research has shown after a certain threshold, it's kind of just money. And I know a lot of people now that I'm in other industries outside this, that where I deal in very large transactions. I've met a lot of people that are exorbitantly rich that have spent their life chasing money and more money and money and money and money and more money. And one of the things I've noticed is, and I'm not going to sit here and say they're all miserable, don't do it. They're not miserable. Most of them aren't miserable. But one of the things that I have noticed is their whole life, because it just adds up day after day after day. At a certain point, their whole life becomes about managing all the money that they've made. And so one of them one time told me he thought he was getting sick with something bad. And he told me on the phone, he was kind of emotional. He goes, Dave, I've spent my whole life making money and I haven't had fun. I haven't, or like, I love making money. It's fun, but I haven't gone out and done anything else. This is all I've ever done. So if I died today, it's like, I don't know, like, what was it all for? I didn't get to actually use any of it. So I think there's a really, and it's hard because our culture is so centered around material possessions and money and all these things. I find it hard to navigate what you should actually be striving for, and like, how much money do you need? Or like, it's probably different for everybody, but I've actually spent a lot of time trying to think about how much money do we need, my family, to have the experiences that we want. And I would encourage anybody that struggles with the same thing, just put a pen to paper and write down, okay, so if me, for me, I'll just give you our example. My wife and I would like to, obviously we have all the normal bills, so you got to cover those things. And then we have 3 kids. We'd like to have beginning of life funds for them. Normally they'd be called college funds. Not a big fan of college always, so I'm going to call it a beginning of life fund. And it's not a lot. It's just enough to make sure that they're not, sleeping on the sidewalk. Just something to give them a little bit of a kick in the ass to go out and get a job and know that they're not going to fall completely down on their face. Okay. After that, it's like, we would like to travel. We'd like to go out and have experiences. Also, why the kids are here. We want to travel and give them experience. A lot of our goals are around experiences. And so in order to do that, you have to have a certain amount of money. But beyond that, I'm not really, I don't want to spend the last half of my life trying to figure out how to manage a crazy amount of money. That sounds really stressful and miserable, actually. I'd like to be able to go, like at some point, like my wife and I just take off on an airplane and go travel somewhere for a few weeks and not have to worry about any of that shit. So I think it just comes down to priorities, but I think because of the wiring from our culture and it's just, you want to make as much money as possible. Like it's all about getting rich. If you scroll through Instagram, every guru is telling you about how to get rich, and that's great. But make sure you know what you're going to do with it, because I can tell you from personal experience, not from me, but the people that I know that do have that ability. Yes, I'm not going to say they're miserable, but I'm going to say that some of them have spent their entire lives managing their money that they made to do other